Okay, so this is going to be an information session for, I think, the general CAMHS team on comic strip conversations and social stories. Yeah, I'm recording this session, but I will stop kind of at the end of the presentation so we can kind of chat a bit more if there's any specific questions. So I'll share my screen. Here it is. Ooh. Okay, so can everyone see the presentation, and can everyone see the slides moving along?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it seems to have frozen for me though, so I'm gonna pause for a second. There we go. So yeah, so we're talking about social stories and comic strip conversations. And technically, when we kind of write about social stories and comic strip conversations, we should always reference the legendary Carol Gray, who came up with the concept of these things in 1991. So they are kind of a kind of trademarked thing. So just so you're aware, it's best to kind of reference her when you're talking about them in reports or anything like that. So we're going to talk about social stories first and why we need to use them. So the idea of social stories is to teach understanding rather than rote compliance. So it definitely is away from the kind of behavioural route for people with a learning disability and or autism. So the idea is that someone has an underlying understanding of why certain behaviours are kind of needed or appropriate in certain situations, rather than just learning it for the sake of learning it. So it's to teach understanding rather than rote compliance, to share social information. So again, a person with a learning disability and or autism might miss certain social cues or the more subtle kind of social information. So it's to help the person understand. It's to describe a context, again, to fully understand a context that you're in. If you have a learning disability or autism, it's much more difficult to put all those pieces together. So social stories often just describe the context of what's going on rather than zooming into a detail or something that's frightening. And they're also really good for preparing for an event. And why do they work? So if you might remember the visuals training, which I think was only last week, social stories are permanent. So we talked about the fact that when you're speaking verbally, you've got to have a really, really high level of cognitive ability to be able to take in the sounds, put them together into words, chop them up into sentences, and then kind of apply the grammar, then apply the context to work out what it is that you just heard. And you've got to do all that in like microseconds as someone's talking. You've got to hold all the information, you've got to process it all, kind of work out what's going on while you're continuing to listen to someone. It's actually really, really difficult. So using something visual means it takes that memory and processing load away, and it's also permanent. It's something you can keep going back to and looking at. Social stories are factual, so they should be kind of concrete and based on fact, and they focus on elements of a situation that a child or young person might struggle to process because of their learning or social or communication needs. Okay, and what does a social story look like? It should always be positive in tone. It should talk about what the child or young person should do rather than what they should not do. It's there are some significant pitfalls of social stories. So for example, if you haven't kind of really read much about them, or you just kind of assume what they're for, unfortunately, especially schools which might be stuck in a kind of old-fashioned way of kind of discipline and behaviour, they tend to be used as something to tell children off, or even kind of shame them, to kind of point out you did this and that was wrong. But no, a social story should always be positive and should talk about kind of what you do rather than what you don't do. Some of the key things. So if you look on the Carol Gray website, she's got quite a good website, and some of her books are often kind of floating around. I generally find her kind of descriptions of social stories a little bit confusing. I feel like there's maybe too many rules that she throws in there. I almost think she's got such a beautifully simple idea that works so well, and she had to make a career out of it. I wonder if maybe she's slightly overcomplicated a lot of her kind of descriptions and guides to kind of almost like legitimize the fact that it's her career. So the things that I would point out are the fact that you need a descriptive sentence and you need coaching sentences. If you look at the Carol Gray stuff in more depth, she goes through all these different types of sentences, which I think once you're kind of up and running with the basic social stories, maybe have a look at those things and think about how you can make, you know, more in-depth social stories. But for now, I would say just remember the two different types of sentences, so descriptive sentence and a coaching sentence. And there should always be a ratio of kind of 2 or, I'm not sure I've written 2 or 5. So 2 to 5 descriptive sentences to just 1 coaching sentence. So a descriptive sentence is where you're describing a situation for the young person, where you're kind of filling in that context, explaining to them what's going on. And then the coaching sentence is the one where you're helping them to decide how they're going to act in that situation. And again, a pitfall of social stories can be, you know, things like, I am not very good at sitting still on the floor. I must remember to sit on the floor. I'm not going to pick my nose. I'm not going to get in the way of my friends, and I'm not going to annoy the teacher. You know, it's just a list of these are all the things that I've got to do. Whereas that is not a social story. A social story should be mainly describing the situation and context with very, very few coaching sentences. So a descriptive sentence provides information about the situation and the context, and also it can describe kind of other people's perceptions as well. So a social story should always be individual to that person and that situation. And your descriptive sentences, you need to be thinking about what is it that the young person hasn't understood. So it's often, you know, something has happened, they've got told off in school, they've offended somebody, they've got upset, they've had a meltdown. What was the trigger? What was the thing that they didn't understand about the situation or the context? Those are the things that I'm going to use in my descriptive sentences. So here's some examples. So sometimes our class sit on the carpet to listen to the teacher. When everyone stays quiet and still, it's easier to see and hear the teacher. So rather than sit down because you're annoying everyone, it's explaining why it's important to say sit still and quiet on the carpet, because it's easier for everyone to see and hear the teacher. Oh yeah, sorry, that was an error. There we go. So can you spot the descriptive sentences? So here are sentences. I am listening to a presentation. I am going to concentrate. I am on Zoom or Teams. I am learning about social stories to help the children and young people I work with. I will try to listen and not go on Instagram on my phone. The speaker is hoping that this will be interesting. So is anyone brave enough to say which one is not a descriptive sentence? Maybe that's the way around. I should have done it. Is there one here that does not fit a descriptive sentence?
Is it the one about trying to listen?
Absolutely. So try to listen and don't go on Instagram on my phone. That would be a coaching sentence instead. And I think, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to amend this, but I think I've mixed up my slides slightly. Have I? Oh, no, I haven't. There we go. So yeah, so these are the descriptive sentences. I'm listening to a presentation. I'm on Zoom, but you're not, you're on Teams. I am learning about social stories to help the children and young people I work with. The speaker is hoping that this will be interesting. Those all describe the situation. And you've got things like what is happening right now, kind of like why it's happening, and also a little bit about kind of my perception that I'm the presenter and I'm hoping it'll be interesting. So the coaching sentences that I've snuck in there are I am going to concentrate and I will try to listen and not go on Instagram. Okay, so coaching sentences, this is the other type of sentence. And this is a sentence which coaches the appropriate behaviour in a positive tone. Oh, just to clarify, someone's coming to fit a smart meter this morning, which is why I'm working from home. So I might have to run out at some point. I don't think they're here. Okay. So yeah, this morning I thought I don't like the word appropriate behaviour. I don't like appropriate to describe behaviour, but I wasn't sure what else to put in there because I worried that kind of veers slightly into the kind of telling off and shaping behaviour of an autistic person. But yeah, I couldn't really think of an example. Oh, hang on. Sorry, they are here. Right. I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording for a second.